Look, guys. Yes, I'm talking to you, Snake. Just evolve some limbs. You've had your fun. It's just now an excuse to be lazy and hang out with your snake mates and not do the washing up. Yeah, snakes. But snakes are the twin protagonists of Snake, Rattle and Roll. And these sentient belts, unlike their fellow legless brethren, well, they never stop eating. No, they're really dynamic. They move around a lot. There's no eating a desert fox and sleeping in the shade for a few weeks for these scaly brothers. These dudes are CrossFit kings, zipping left, right and all directions in between. Now, Snake, Rattle and Roll was an isometric 1990 platformer released on the Nintendo Entertainment System by the absolute kings of isometric gameplay the previous decade. That being Rare. Rare, of course, were formerly known as Ultimate Play the Game during their wild and lusty youth, releasing absolute bangers like Nightlaw, Alienate, Nightshade and Gunfight on the 8-bit computer formats. Then, of course, they went and started hanging around with more sophisticated types and changed their names. But it was no surprise that when they started making games on the NES as Rare, the very best games that they put out were viewed from the isometric perspective. RC Pro-Am, Cobra Triangle and Ivan Stewart's Super Off-Road were early successes for the team, who would later find their 2D feet with stuff like Battletoads and the Donkey Kong franchise. In the midst of these isometric titles was the reptilesome Snake, Rattle and Roll, a title you can imagine coming out on the Spectrum, albeit in flip screen and in monochrome. Snake, Rattle and Roll was a game that, unlike its computer-based forebears, relied more on reactions and skill than puzzling and backtracking. The levels are short and punchy, requiring you to gain enough snaky weight by eating these little skittles known as nibbly pibblies to get the serpentine length you need to tip the scale that will then open the exit door and allow you to access the next level. What a fantastic example to set children. Gain loads of weight, keep eating and you'll achieve your goals. But then you know what? If children don't know the difference between themselves and 8-bit snakes, they're never likely to achieve a great deal anyway, let's be honest. Snake, Rattle and Roll can be played 1 or 2 players simultaneously through the 11 isometric levels, and they will grow quicker if they eat nibbly pibblies of their own colours, and they will grow even faster still if they eat the elusive yellow ones. They're often pumped out by tricksy dispensers that, while mostly nice, will on occasion pump out the odd bomb. Whoever operates these dispensers needs to have a talk to the police, because you know what, it's this sort of behaviour that mirrors real life, where people, like poison dog food or stick brooms up horses' bums, that kind of thing. It's not good. Animal cruelty is never a good thing. The nibblies can also be found in various manholes, but these can also contain many of the enemy types that include things like toilet seats and the odd Monty Python style crushing foot. Naturally, from these enemies you can probably figure out that the 2 lead programmers were Ultimate Play the Game originals, rather than employees they picked up when they expanded to the US market. And you would be right. Founder Tim Stamper and Mark Betteridge were so British that they drink tea from Yorkshire puddings while watching Coronation Street and saying, "Call blimey, governor." Betteridge had challenged himself to make the smallest file size for a NES game possible that he could, and the basic backgrounds featured in the game allowed him to do this with the aid of Stamper's technical expertise. That sounds like I'm saying that the game was a phoned-in steal of your £30 to £40, but in fact it was a technical feat in terms of its high-speed scrolling, which was difficult to achieve on the old grey block from Nintendo. A clear inspiration on Snake, Rattle and Roll was Marble Madness, from both a gameplay and an aesthetic point of view, but it also had that game's fluidity when it comes to the scrolling on the NES. There's a nice mixture of styles as you progress, with a lot of water-based gameplay in the middle section of the game and some bastard hard slippery ice slopes as you near the top of the mountain that represents the huge sprawling game world. Stating their intent to port this to the Game Boy, Level 7 is basically Nintendo Game Boy written in blocks, though it never came out, so well done on your forward planning there, Rare. Never before has an entertainment product been such a letdown. Thankfully, there's been a few since, hasn't there? There was actually a sequel that came out on the Game Boy called Sneaky Snakes, but it was in 2D and was pretty poorly received, but that's not the same, is it? Anyway, if you ascend to the top, and well done if you do, because this game is really rather tricky, then you're snatched off in a spaceship for further adventures. And indeed, the completion screen promises an exciting sequel called Snakes in Space, which again never came out. Christ, Rare, why are you like a deadbeat dad from an American movie? All unkept promises and hogwash. You give me that child maintenance for our snake sons, Rare. In fairness to Rare, though, they do backtrack on this in the conversion to the Mega Drive that was released later on in 1993. There's an extra level after the UFO that takes Rattle and Roll off into space. It's set on a planetoid that the pair crashed into. After you finish it, they're whisked back to Earth without so much as an adventure or a thank you to the space snake deities, but at least we got a sort of conclusion to that promise of sorts, I guess. The UK magazines absolutely loved Snake Rattle and Roll. C&VG called it graphically superb, one of those rare breed of games that is just so good there aren't enough superlatives to describe it. They gave it a 95%. Wow. Showing this wasn't isolated hyperbole, if fun and frolics are what you're after, this is definitely for you. Rush out and demand it, is what Meme Machine said, and they gave it a 94%. Is it that good? Hell no! I certainly enjoyed it back then, and still do now, but Snake Rattle and Roll isn't in the same ballpark as the very best games on the NES, such as Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario Bros. 3. It's a solid 7 out of 10 to me. It's got a good look, a nice playstyle, and it's a stiff challenge. But the isometric viewpoints make some of the trickier leaps a little bit unfair. That said, spending time with the game, and you can sort of adjust and understand the idiosyncrasies and how to jump and where the different levels are a little bit better. Snake Rattle and Roll was a decent evolution of Ultimate's output from the 80s, unlike Snakes, who just can't be bothered to evolve and get themselves some limbs. Grow some arms, you bunch of future wallets.